So before we begin, I just want to acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territories of the First Nations and Native American peoples. Here where I am in Vancouver, those peoples are the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. But I know where many of you are, you're on the land of other nations. Always, but especially during these difficult days, let us remember our connection to our sisters and brothers in these nations and pray for the day in which we might be with them in right relationship. Harold, thank you so much. Over to you.
Oh, great to be here. Yeah, we have a cozy little group tonight. That's better for discussion purposes. You know, friends, I tried to send another first page. The handout I have given you starts out with a sort of a chart. It says at the top, alternative dovetailing visions of humanity's future. So what I did there is list three of the women mystics that we've looked at, and I compared them, you know, on four sort of points, you might say, or four issues. What did they say? What did they say about how do they conceive of the participants in their vision? What do they think about evolution in the spiritual sense? What do they think about social transformation? And what do they think about hope? What's the basis for hope? So this was like a chart, and the trouble is that I tried to add Mirra Alfassa, or the mother, to the chart. That's the woman we looked at 2 weeks ago. So my new chart has her in there. Anyway, this is the last session, so this is a little bit of review. And you might remember that right in the beginning, I distinguished between I mystics and we mystics. The women who kind of emphasized personal spiritual growth, and others emphasized humanity's development and spiritual growth, and some sort of balanced them together. These four that I'm listing here, well, Hildegard, Tahirih, Mirra Alfassa, the one that we did 2 weeks ago, and Barbara Marx Hubbard, the one we're going into detail on tonight, all of them had a tremendous we orientation. They seem to be talking about, you know, the spiritual advancement of humanity as a whole, planetary culture, an ever-advancing civilization, co-creation. That was the term that Hildegard used. So for better or worse, my mind's always comparing things, you know. So this, the chart I'm looking at has these four women, and it mentions their overall vision. For example, Hildegard, remember her 800 years ago? She emphasized co-redemptive, creation-centered spirituality and ethics. In other words, she was trying to bring together, you might say, the sciences and theology. She was throwing in things like what we would call holistic health. She was emphasizing the web of all relations, the greenness of life, and the creative advance. Okay, and then Tahirih, that was several weeks ago, the Baha'i visionary, was talking about an ever-advancing civilization, that the Baha'i faith is breaking from the Islamic tradition and sort of opening up to all religious people, non-religious people, bringing about, you know, a unified global community. So I'm not going to look at all the details of these 4 points, but I did give you this as sort of food for thought. I want to compare Mirra Alfassa, the lady we looked at 2 weeks ago, and Barbara Marx Hubbard, because they're the ones closest to our own day. So yeah, Mirra Alfassa was in, you know, the 20th century, the earlier part of the 20th century, and Barbara Marx Hubbard only passed away in 2019. So she's like a contemporary. Okay. So for the mother, I say her vision, I call it integral communal advancement and East-West vision. If you remember, you know, she was the guy, she was the woman who met Aurobindo, who in India, who had studied at Oxford, who tried to integrate East and West. We looked at a chart that had 12 levels of evolution, starting from the mineral realm all the way up to the divine or ultimate realm. And some of those realms were human consciousness levels, right? So Mirra Alfassa, or the mother, was really focusing on conscious evolution or spiritual evolution. And she was talking about, she founded Auroville, a community that used integral yoga as its curriculum. So they were interested in the sciences, interested in the arts, but they wanted to integrate all that with different types of yoga and meditation. Okay, and I just want to read what I wrote about the basis for hope from Tahirih and from Mirra Alfassa, and also Barbara Marx Hubbard, who will go into with more detail. Basis of hope. So Tahirih, the point that I put on the chart, hope for the future is grounded in God's progressive revelation, which has led to this present era, the promised day of all ages, which is also the beginning of the cycle of fulfillment. So Tahirih was saying humanity's been given these messengers or founders or prophets, and that each one of them brings about a kind of cultural and spiritual advance. And that now humanity's mature enough to form a global civilization. We weren't mature enough to even to think about that in the past. Okay, Mirra Alfassa, her basis of hope, I'm summarizing it this way: hope for the future is grounded in divine reality reaching down to us as we are called to reach up. Right, so in other words, remember that chart? She was sort of saying the divine realm is actually wants us to reach up to it. And the place where they meet, she calls the life divine, or Beatitude's kiss. What a beautiful image. So the higher realm is reaching down to us that are sort of in the middle. Below us is the material world. We bring the material up and beautify it. We reach to higher levels of consciousness, and then there's a point where we actually meet. And if you remember, she was saying humanity is evolving to a higher species. Like our consciousness is evolving, and it should evolve, and there will come a point where we see the unity of all things. We will have a unified consciousness, which is a higher level of reality. Okay, and now Barbara Marx Hubbard, that's the notes at the bottom of the first page there. Mm-hmm. Who's the participants? I'm just reading. She says, this is her quote from her: all people are one planetary body. All people, a planetary body, attuning to one another and to the designing intelligence, that is, to God. So what does she mean by God? She uses that phrase a lot, the designing intelligence of the universe. So for her, that is God. God is the designing intelligence that you can see manifested everywhere in the universe. She also speaks of God as the source, capital S, or the spirit, or creative intelligence with capital letters, and cosmic design. Those are all phrases she uses for the divine. Now, and remember, Barbara Marx Hubbard totally integrated all the sciences. Like she mastered engineering, theoretical physics, astronomy was a special interest of hers, biology. We'll find that all out later. But so she's integrating science with spirituality in a very direct and intimate way. Okay, let me go to the second point down there on the chart. What does she think about evolution? She says, synergistic convergence in 12 major networking areas will produce golden innovations and evolutionary breakthroughs. Let me explain what that means. That's like she is making up new words, right? A synergistic convergence, or SynCon, I actually went to one of these. It's a conference with people from 12 different fields. Okay, and the fields include governance, health, infrastructure, justice, media, relations, science, spirituality, arts, economics, education, and environment. So she says, if you invite people who are doing creative work, cutting edge work in all those 12 areas, you bring them together, and some kind of what she calls a evolutionary breakthrough is likely to happen. So she says you can actually directly influence evolution by bringing people together. right, across fields and inviting them to share what's working, what seems to be working in their fields. And then the sparks start flying, she says, right? You have a breakthrough, evolutionary breakthrough. Okay, so the next point down, 3, under my first page chart, it's about society, her vision of social transformation. Society can integrate science, spirituality, and social engineering co-creatively. This is the process she calls conscious evolution, which is her main idea, conscious evolution. So in effect, she's saying up until the human species emerged, evolution was unconscious. And then we gradually evolved, and we came to the point where we understand evolution to some degree, right? And we can enter into evolution consciously with our spiritual powers, our mental powers, our cultural powers. Okay, and then 4th point down, what is hope based on? Hope for the future is grounded in nature's tradition, which she says nature's tradition of quantum transformation. Let me unpack that. I think she's saying nature has a way of moving along smoothly, and then there's a creative breakthrough after some chaos to a higher level. And she calls that a quantum transformation. You know, for example, the earth is going along kind of, you know, it breaks off the sun and da-da-da-da, and it's hot. And then, you know, it cools down a little bit in some land forms. But there are some sharp changes that happen in evolution. You know, for example, when life burst onto the scene, all these different species that were in the ocean. And then some of them came out onto land, and this sort of thing. So she's saying evolution is not smooth. It's smooth in between these creative breakthroughs and advancements.
And that these disruptions,
she's calling those quantum transformations. Yeah, Susan, please.
And the disruptions are like an critical part of that. Like they're indispensable. Like you have to have these moments of disruption, or you don't get the quantum leap.
Yeah, she says that's nature's tradition.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, that's what an interesting way to put that. That the life as we know it, and planets as we know them, galaxies as we know them, have this smooth sailing for a while, and then disruptions that end up being creative or bringing something new. So she's calling that a quantum transformation. Wow.
Harold,
please, yeah.
Could we perhaps regard the climate crisis that the whole planet is on?
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. Please, yeah.
It's a time of quantum transformation. We can't see it, but if we, think in these terms, everything is changing, needing to.
This is her main point. These things that she calls crises are opportunities, right? Mm-hmm. So crises are, in fact, she calls crises evolutionary drivers. That's mm-hmm. another term she invented. Mm-hmm. A crisis is an evolutionary driver. So in the world today, let's just take the 20th century. We invented nuclear weapons. There was a superpower standoff. There was a big separation between rich and poor, right? The wealth is not well distributed. We started to ruin the environment and kill species, right? These are crises. Okay, and she's saying, you could say her whole point of view is extremely optimistic. She's saying, the more we learn about the so-called problems, and the more we bring people together who have expertise in these areas and emphasize and ask them what's working, what could work and what is already working, that improves the odds that there's breakthroughs. So let me finish this one. Hope for the future is grounded in nature's tradition of quantum transformations. And then look, there's a little short sentence here that to her, it defines evolution. Okay, she says, evolution raises consciousness and freedom through more complex order. So if you think, for example, of the human species, our mind or brain is a more complex order than the brains of other animals. And because it's a more complex order, it has greater capacity, right? And so she's saying that's how evolution proceeds. It raises the degree. She thinks that there's a little bit of consciousness even in the elemental realm, right? You know, like, so materials have a degree of consciousness. Plants have a higher degree of consciousness. Animals have a higher degree. So she sees that consciousness is slowly rising. And the more consciousness you have and more complex order you have, the more freedom you have or more capacity. Now, do you remember 2 weeks ago, the Mirra Alfassa, the mother, she was also talking about evolution of consciousness too. So I'm just trying to show parallels here. These are the two most recent women we're looking at. And in fact, all these we mystics are very concerned with evolution, as I read it. They're describing it differently because they lived in different times, coming from different backgrounds, and but they're all talking about advancement, beautifying the earth with consciousness, right? Making a more advanced planetary culture, or as Tahirih put it, an ever-advancing global civilization, which would be earth-friendly as well. Okay. Anyway, that's an introduction to these the four, what I'm calling we mystics. And I have a bias. I don't mind sharing biases once in a while. I think humanity has evolved from a more I consciousness to, say, village consciousness, to city consciousness, to regional consciousness. Now we can actually think about global reality. It's easier to do that today because of communication and infrastructure. We've evolved to the point where we can think we, and we does not mean only my tribe. See, once upon a time, we meant my tribe, my religion, my culture, my nation. And now it can mean my kind, humankind, and our capacity to even go further. So to me, we consciousness is an advancement upon purely I consciousness. However, I got to qualify. We remain individuals. Human beings are individual. We come in individual form. So spiritual growth can never lose its relevance, right? We are individuals, but we're part of larger groups. So both spiritual growth for the individual and co-creating a larger society they're both important. These four women, I think, are talking about co-creation a lot. Things we can do together and with God too. Co-creation means with higher reality as well. Okay, that's just a quick introduction to the we mystics and how Barbara Marx Hubbard is definitely one of them, and the one who you might say used science the most. I think Hildegard used science quite a bit too, considering that she was 800 years ago. But another thing is she's future oriented. But I see all of these as future oriented, but especially Barbara Marx Hubbard, because that's her field. She's called a futurist. And she even set up future studies as a new discipline. And you find some universities popping up mostly in the Western Hemisphere with this field called future studies. Some of you have heard of Buckminster Fuller. Yep. You see, in this course, I've said, behind all these great women is a good man. Buckminster Fuller is the good man behind Barbara Marx Hubbard, right? He's great in himself, but you see, he believed in her. He said, oh, this lady knows the most about the future. She's organizing all the forms of knowledge and looking at the implications for the future. So he had nothing but praise for this lady, Barbara Marx Hubbard. I actually got to meet her in a Zoom meeting. Barbara, I also saw her at a conference. She came to Vancouver in the year 2000. There were a lot of people, 300 or 400. I had a bunch of questions, but there were no questions. She just gave a talk and then left. However, she was totally exhausted at that time. And I'll tell you why later. This is an important piece of her life story. She was building up to the year 2000 as some kind of a possible breakthrough for all of humanity. She was treating the new millennium as super important. Right? So she kind of, the term burnout? I think the last, let's say between 1995 and 2000, she was so busy that she crashed. And like she had what you might call a nervous breakdown. And then she recovered and wrote a book about how to overcome your ego. She wrote we'll look at that book. This was her. She saw the process that happened to her and learned from it and wrote about it. Okay. Let me quickly go to the second page, and then I'll stop talking at some point after I introduce her a little more and see what you think about this lady. Oh yeah, Donna, please.
I'm just going to take you a little bit off topic, but you said behind every woman is a man. Who were the men behind the other three?
Oh, okay. All right. In other words, you don't remember everything I said in the whole course? Oh, that's okay. I'm just joking. No, but the good man behind Mirra, the woman we looked at 2 weeks ago, was this Aurobindo guy.
Okay.
Aurobindo.
Okay.
Yeah. Who was before that? Tahirih. Let's say the good man behind her were the two prophets that she knew about, the Bab and Baha'u'llah. Before that, let me go back. I'm looking at.
And then was Hildegard. Hildegard was the fourth.
Yeah, Hildegard. The good man behind her was this guy named Bernard of Clairvaux, who was a distinguished theologian back in those days. Okay. Anyway, you can keep going. Teresa of Avila.
Well, no, you said these four, so I'm challenging you.
No, all of them. But anyway, all of them, we could do it for the whole course. There was always a good man behind the great woman. Okay. The second page is a quick summary of a very busy life. Like, oh my God, she had 5 children, and she did I don't know how she did this. She had 5 children, and she did a decent job at parenting, and she ended up being close to all of her children, as adults. So somehow she got through that, but she had trouble with time management throughout her whole life. Here's another thing. She wrote in a journal all her life. She started doing that at a young age, right? So she ended up refining what she was writing in her journal into books, into projects, she was always sort of building on, what she was learning. She's deliberately learning and then organizing her learnings and rewriting. Okay, so right there at the top, I say who she is: visionary futurist, author, speaker, educator, citizen, diplomat. Do you remember the superpower standoff when the US and Russia were hated each other and were afraid of each other? There started to be meetings. This is actually, why am I jumping ahead to the, anyway, we'll get to that. She set up meetings to get to know the Russians, how Russians and people in the US could learn about each other. Spiritual pioneer, philosophical heir of Buckminster Fuller. And he was the guy who wrote Spaceship Earth, referring to our planet Earth, calling it Spaceship Earth. He also wrote a book called I Seem to Be a Verb. He wrote a book called Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth. He's the inventor of the geodesic dome. So Buckminster Fuller is like a Renaissance man. And he said, oh my God, Barbara Marx Hubbard is the future of our understanding, because he looked to him like she was integrating all the sciences with all the spiritual and ethical truths. Okay, I'm skipping down. Look at 1996. She was 37. She had a birth revelation, a vision of humanity as one body, born into the universe as conscious self-evolvers. She, at that time, 1966, became a founding member of the World Future Society, founding member of that, and later co-founded the Society for the Universal Human. So that's her big idea, that we're evolving into a universal human. We've been very local humans. You know, we've been geographically and ethnically and religiously defined, and we're starting to come into a universal human consciousness. We'll identify with humanity as a whole. Okay. Now, in 1970, she started this thing called the Committee for the Futures, which developed the SynCon process. Remember I talked about synergistic conferences? This is so cool. I actually went to one of these things. It was set up before she visited Vancouver. So it was in the late 1990s. And those people, you know, you picked an area. So I think I picked spirituality. So you get together with other people in a certain area and you do demonstrations of things that you think are breakthrough or creative. And then the group discusses things. And then they make other presentations to some of the other groups. So that's what a SynCon is like. And she had been setting up these things a lot in the 1990s in 12 fields. You see them written there in very small print: governance, health, infrastructure, justice, the same ones I mentioned before. I find that a fascinating list because those are the dimensions of society, essential dimensions of society. And she says we need all of them. They're all equally important, and we need to find what's working in those areas and bring what's working together. And then that will help evolution take a leap forward and solve the chaos, solve the problems. You know, a mini example of this is when, like, let's say there were a conference on COVID. All the people who are experts on COVID got together in one place and had a giant conference. Do you think that would make a difference? You see, she says it always makes a difference. This is why when science has a big conference or when artists get together, you can have a breakthrough. Right? You can actually systematically engineer, she calls it social engineering, a breakthrough. All right. Look at number 1980. She had a Christ experience. Hearing a voice say human beings are becoming Christ-like beings, co-creators, evolving toward Homo universalis. Now, let me give you my interpretation of this. She's what I would call a Gnostic or spiritualist Christian, right? So she actually read the whole New Testament very carefully in the book of Revelations, and she made interpretations of it that are totally sort of fit with New Age spirituality. So I would call her a Gnostic or spiritualist Christian if I had to label her. But she also studied world history, and she thought and said something I totally believe in, that the great founders of the major religions generated new civilizations. They helped civilization evolve. They're really important. And she says the difference is now we don't need a new one. We're becoming one ourselves. That's her belief. And I want to sort of discuss that belief at the end, you know, have a discussion about that. What, is that possible? Right? Okay. You know, she wrote a whole bunch of books. And we're not going to look at them all, but I've listed them there. You know, look at the titles of them. The Hunger of Eve, One Woman's Odyssey Toward the Future. Look at another one called The Evolutionary Journey, A Personal Guide to a Positive Future. You know, by evolutionary journey, she means the beginning of the universe from the Big Bang on to now. That's what evolution is. It isn't just biological evolution. It's interplanetary evolution, astronomical evolution, all kinds of evolution. Look at number 1995, The Revelation, A Message of Hope for the New Millennium. That book, she took the book of Revelation, the last book of the New Testament, and gave a new interpretation to it, saying it's very, very positive. It talks about humanity evolving spiritually. So for her, the return of Christ is humanity becoming more Christ-like. That's what she means by the return. So that's her interpretation of the book of Revelation. Okay. Then I told you she set up all these conferences and had a collapse. So in the year 2000, right after 2000 came, she sort of collapsed, and went in the hospital and had to spend time alone. And she realized she had bitten off more than she could chew. And she wrote a book called Emergence, the Shift from Ego to Essence. So what she came to realize is she had been tied up with a certain ego task that she had assigned herself to bring about this total change of the world, right, in the year 2000. Well, of course she fell short of that. That's kind of a big task, isn't it? But she did generate a lot of these conferences, okay? So, and then collapsed. And now, but then after that, she says, I think I have a better balance. I see the danger of identifying too much with the ego and not enough with essence. Essence, she says, is our spirit, which is universal, which is, for everyone. It's for the advancement of humanity. Look what she wrote down there near the bottom of page 1. I am one with the essence that pervades the universe. I am an expression of the processes of the creation of God. I am the beloved, capital B, I have sought since time immemorial. Later on, though, she also said, I am humble. I have universes to understand, infinite things to learn, but I am born. So this born thing really matters to her. So she means born as a universal human. We can all be born as a universal human, which means we're able to help bring about the future. Just briefly, the lady we looked at before, the Mother Alfassa, who was at Oroville, I think she was very similar to this. She wanted to sort of say, every one of us can help bring about divine consciousness coming down to the human level, or us going up toward divine consciousness. So it goes both ways. And it would be interesting if they had ever talked to each other, the Mother and Barbara Marx Hubbard, because there's a lot of overlap, I think, in what they were doing. The Mother wanted to form a universal city, and she did, Oroville, and she thought that they would start popping up all over the place. There would be these universal cities, that they were not purely nationally loyal. They're loyal to the whole world. They're loyal to the whole planet. They're loyal to, the imperative to grow. Okay, then after all this, well, you remember 2012? 2012, a lot of people, they thought that the Mayan calendar pointed to 2012 as a cosmic change. Well, she grabbed onto that one too and worked to build up toward it. But this time she kept her ego in check and worked from her essence or spirit. And so she didn't have a collapse. And then near the end of her life, she passed away in 2019. She was working on what she calls Humanity Ascending, a new way through together, a bunch of DVDs that were designed to generate participation. She was very action-oriented, this lady. Okay, that's the introduction. I didn't touch on everything, but that's enough. Please, yeah, Kathy.
Yeah, thank you. I just see at the very bottom, it says she was working in Loveland, Colorado with the international headquarters of the Emissaries of Divine Light. Is she associated with them?
Is she associated with them? She was for the last 7 or 8 years. She was with them. But see, in her mind, the emissaries also were networking with other groups that had a similar viewpoint. Okay. So I don't know what she would have said if you'd have asked her, are you an emissary of divine light? She said, I'm working with them. She probably would have said, and I'm working with a whole lot of other people too. She also was part of this thing called the Evolutionary Church, which was Christians who we're reinterpreting the New Testament, especially the book of Revelation, as saying this is prophesying an advance which is happening today. This return of Christ and new millennium is now, right? We're moving into that now. So that attracted some very spiritually oriented Jewish people too, and Buddhist people and other people. So they simply called it the Evolutionary Church. So I don't know what she would say if you said, are you a member, right? Or should say, I cooperate with all people of goodwill, she would probably say. Okay, any other comments, questions about all of this? Had you heard of her before? I know, see, Joan has, because she suffered through this class, I think twice before, only once, she says. Okay. Yeah, Donna.
I'm interested in your opinion of whether you think this has staying power. I mean, we're only, what, 3 years from her death. Do you think that what she wrote and what she established and the times that we live in and etc.
I was hoping to bring this up near the end, like for the last 15 minutes, but briefly, you see, I'm a Baha'i, or I'm in the sequence of major religions. I don't think we can do without figures like Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, Baha'u'llah. So a Gnostic is someone who says, in effect, I can rise up to the ultimate levels all by myself, right? So I think she's a Gnostic. I think she's saying, and that issue has been part of the issues in the women we've looked at. Some of them were more monistic or Gnostic, not agnostic, Gnostic, meaning I can attain enough knowledge to make infinite spiritual progress. So from my point of view, we're dependent on what Buddha taught humanity. We may not know that or not, or we're dependent on what Muhammad taught. We're dependent on what Moses taught. We're dependent on what Jesus taught. We're dependent on what Baha'u'llah taught about the unity of humanity. We may not know the source of our insights, but we're dependent on that. But that's only a theory. I mean, that's a belief I have. So a Gnostic says, we're not dependent on those people. We can actually become like them ourselves. And in my mind, they're a higher level of reality. They're human, but they're higher than human. And we can't just become like them. We can maybe get closer to being like them. But this is all, it's a matter of opinion, right? This is something, I don't fight about this with anybody. I'm interested in all views, but I know what I believe, given my study of world history and world religions too. Other comments about any of this so far? Please, yeah, Susan.
I can see how we would call her an optimist.
Yeah.
And that she's very confident in the capacity. However, there's the real world, and there are faulty human beings all over, and who are really mucking up this process. So what does she, and I guess religion is like this anyway, right? Like, I think religion focuses on what could be, right? Like the ideal, what is the best of all possible things. And then there's like the day-to-day, and there are those that don't follow and aspire to this thing. So what does she say about the forces that might interrupt this evolution? Or
they would say something like, they're going to cause a crisis that will bring about a transformation on the other side of it. So there might be a giant war. There might be an ecological collapse. There could be an economic crash. For her, that's just an evolutionary driver. We will grow beyond that. So yeah, you could say hyper optimistic, or that she thinks these problems, challenges, sins, corruptions are part of a larger grist for the mill, right? They actually help humanity advance. So she's taken a very cosmic view, of this kind of stuff.
That's a that's a tough view. That's a very salmon upstream view.
Upstream view. You
Yeah,
know,
it really
here's
is.
how she said we should have a peace room if we have a war room. In fact, she ran for vice president. I don't know what year. I think I put it on my timeline here. 1983, campaign nomination for vice presidency, Democratic Party. I don't think she wasn't nominated. She wanted to be. And she was advocating that why not have a peace room if we have a war room? Why don't we collect good news instead of bad news? Why don't we? She was trying to flip it all around. She called it new news. There should be news that emphasizes what's working, not what's not working. How do we solve those problems? Let's collect examples of that. So it's a paradigm shift. You can't call her naive or stupid because she knows too much. She has just another way of framing it, right? Those are evolutionary drivers. Those problems are what force the breakthrough. They force it. What else do you think about this? Anything you've heard here?
I hope she's right. It's a standard Buddhist kind of stance that like nothing changed. Well, everything's changing, and that's the thing that doesn't change. So even like things get better for a while, then they fall apart, and then they get better, and then they fall apart. And like you don't really get out of that. There's no like end time, and like at least from the Buddha himself, although there are different, different groups have different ideas about this. So I find this kind of stuff really inspiring, where I'm like, wow, that sounds much better than what I got. I hope that's true. I don't know. I can be kind of like, I don't know. We're just kind of a mess forever over here. So it sounds great. I don't know. It's not looking so good, but maybe we're heading towards one of those changes.
Hey, Joan, please, Joan. Yeah.
Harold, I'm wondering if you know of other well-known people that follow her. I'm thinking of some of the other women you've talked about who have had influence in high places.
This lady has a big following, Barbara Marx Hubbard. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah.
There's something, you see this thing called conscious evolution? Here's her book. This is the magnum opus. You see, she got a lot of books, but I think this is the main one. Conscious Evolution, Awakening to the Power of Our Social Potential. So she put kind of all her stuff in that book. And the other books are developing certain parts of it. Anyway, but so she's got something called a curriculum. She set up a school called Gateway. Isn't it on your notes at the bottom of your first page? Where did I put it? It's called the Gateway to Our Conscious Evolution. So she started the Conscious Evolution Foundation, which is almost like a spiritual movement, but it also it absorbs good news, you might say, or developments in all fields, especially things like astronomy and technology and agriculture too. How do we get more food? How can we distribute food? She says things that a lot of people agree with. We have the ability to meet all the needs. We just don't have the systems of governance properly arranged to bring it all about. We could educate everybody, give a computer to everybody. We could, lift up the world. She's absolutely right. And there's a lot that sort of opposes all that. How nationalistic we are, how tied to our separate religions we are. But no, she has a following. Like, when she came to Vancouver, I saw they had to turn people away. They only could fit 400 in there. A whole lot of more people wanted to hear her. And they were people that knew her from somewhere else. They'd already been aligned with her work. They were people that did these synergistic conferences. And I had read about her too, because as a Unitarian, we paid attention to Buckminster Fuller, right? I was starting to study Buckminster Fuller, and then he mentioned her. I go, oh, I better read about her too, right? So I did that for a while. And then I noticed later on through my becoming a Baha'i and an interfaith person, a lot of the ideas she has are believed by people in other, sort of let's call it the modern version, or the reforming version, or the renewed version of all the other faiths, believe a lot of the stuff she's saying. Yeah, like you could take Unitarian principles of science and religion should, complement each other. We should investigate truth forever. There's an interdependent web of all existence. She would say those are Unitarian principles, but they're important to her too. Yeah. Bev, you're really quiet. What are you thinking? And so you could say it's none of my business. You could say that too. Mm-hmm.
Well, when you were talking about things that happen that are frustrating, as in COVID and whatnot, but I don't know, it's actually transformed me. And Zoom has transformed me because I'm attending more learning internationally than I could ever have imagined, and meeting wonderful souls in these little groups where we break up.
Same thing's happening to me.
For me, it's an astounding thing for me. And that's a gift that 2 years ago, I wouldn't have wanted, but now, I wouldn't want to go back.
So the part of the good news of COVID is that the world learned to network a little better, right? And learn together and meet your old friends. I'm reconnecting with my college friends from 50 years ago. I cannot believe it. I really liked these people 50 years ago, and I like them now, but we're catching up on what happened in those 50 years. Couldn't do that without Zoom.
And anyway, it's making it easier to find resonance with people you might not have had a chance to talk with, right? We share a lot of common thoughts, which are not about, hey, I'm right and you're wrong. That's kind of like, we're way beyond that. And we are in that synergistic learning mode. Every little meeting adds something.
Synergistic. That's one of her favorite words, Barbara Marx.
Well, she's with us,
That's right. Susan, you were going to say something. I saw a hand go up. I was imagining things. Okay. Let me show you a little bit more, okay? Now, what I gave you was a book review. You see, page 3 and 4 are basically, I'm outlining this book, Conscious Evolution. So we're not going to talk about all that, but I want to show you her drift. What she's actually ending up talking about all the different fields there are, like history in a new way, news media in a new way. Look at number 4. Our crisis is a birth. That's number 4 means chapter 4. Chapter 4. Our crisis is a birth. And she says, 1945 was the labor pains. You know what was going on in the world in 1945? We just ended World War II. And so look at these 5 lessons of evolution. Quantum transformation is nature's tradition, like we talked about before. Problems are evolutionary drivers leading to transformation. Crises precede transformation. Holism is inherent in all nature. You know what holism? It says the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Like all the chemicals in the body are worth about $1.87, but when they're together, they do this magical thing called a human life. So the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Evolution raises consciousness and freedom through more complex order. See, these are very deep principles that she thinks you can find in science that apply to why evolution happens and how the problems are overcome gradually. What else? Well, look down at now part 2. See, so part 1 is the new story of creation. That is a new way of talking about evolution from the Big Bang on. Part 2, conscious evolution. This is the new worldview that she's developing. And she unpacks that several different ways. Part 3 is the social potential movement. So she's saying we got to work, we have to realize it's we. It's all about we. We collectively have a lot of capacity. Look what she says in chapter 9, Nature's Secret. Unstable, dysfunctional systems yield higher orders. That's, you know, remember, Susan, you were talking about, we got a lot of problems. She says, well, of course we do. Every one of those is a learning opportunity. So she's got a way of flipping it right around, you know, and say, well, what are you going to do about this? Let's work on this. You know, get with the program, get with a new program, you know, contribute your best self. On and on and on. She has a program on news that I find interesting. She says news tends to focus on the problems. Why not flip it around? The new news, inspiring and true reports of what's working in the world. What if we investigated that? What's working in the world? And tried to build on what's working in the world. Donna, your hand is up.
I think CTV has caught on to Barbara Hubbard, because have you noticed at the end of each broadcast, there's an up story, an inspired story?
In general, the Canadian news is superior to the US news in that regard.
Yeah. So this is CTV, and sometimes CBC does too, you know, but CTV very purposefully at the end of each newscast, there's an interesting human.
It's utterly delightful.
Yeah.
You know, like pay it forward examples. You find someone that decides to pay it forward. That's beautiful. Oh my goodness. They had a problem. They solved it. They wanted to make sure other people had bounty that they learned, you know, or that's amazing. So she has a lot of details on that, how to bring about good news and collected good news and what use to make of good news. And that was what the peace room was going to be all about, as opposed to a war room. She thought you should bring, you know, it should have all the technological sophistication of a war room. You should kind of have monitoring everything around the world that's going well, where peace, where you have justice and you have peace and you have cooperation. What's making it work well? What can we learn from that? You know, in a way, it's just simple common sense, a lot of what she's saying. And yet it's kind of uncommon, this outlook. Anything else? Oh, I got to show you what. Look at page 4. Yeah, oh, Bev, you're muted, Bev. We want to hear you.
Okay, here we go. I was at a Nature Spirits Zoom conference recently, and we were talking about with animal communicators, people who can communicate with whales and different things. And what they were saying was had a resonance with this. They said, please don't look out at the ocean and think of all the plastic and the plastic islands and how they're growing and whatnot, because that goes to the consciousness of the whales and the marine life. Look at it and see it as sparkling, teeming with life. Go to the health, go to what you want, grow the good. And that's kind of in the same.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
Same thing. And that's something we need to do and practice. Yeah.
But I think picking up the garbage is a really positive image. Like, I really love that image. It's not negative to me. Like, there are people who actually do that, right? You know, I love to see how much they've taken out, and then they do something with it. That is utterly exciting.
Well, see, that's good news. That's the good news.
Good news.
Right? Yeah.
Now here, look at, this is interesting. The last part of her book is called The Great Awakening. Does that have a familiar ring to it? Now, okay, and so she was trying to bring about a great awakening. She got invested in this idea, right? She's going to bring about syncons, you know, to bring about, so like the year 2000, that's the new millennium. Do you remember all the stuff about that? Well, she got into that, and she was writing this before that was happening. And she talked about a way to prepare for that, right? And bring it about. Look at this little, what she said here. I'm reading under chapter 15, Great Awakening, a planetary awakening in our lifetimes. 3 elements, spiritual, emotional, and practical. And look at these few simple words. We can feed, house, educate, restore, explore, cooperate, and co-create. We can do these things. There's evidence that we, humanity, can do these things. So do these things with others who are doing these things. And that will bring about the Great Awakening. Okay, and then she described in the last chapter what it might look like and how to get with the program. She provides websites and all kinds of stuff and groups you can join to work on some problem and bring about a breakthrough in all of these 12 areas. Okay, but remember what happened. She had a collapse. Even Barbara Marx Hubbard, you know, broke down. I'm not surprised when you hear what she was trying to do, bring about a great awakening. I think she felt like she had an unusual responsibility to make a contribution to that, right? And then she bounded back, you know, a year later through that book, had to have an inner journey. She said, you know, I hadn't had an inner journey. I needed to have an inner journey. I was doing all this outer stuff, right? So some kind of a balance occurred. Now, I wanted to have you read and talk about her vision of the future. This is like you know, Unitarians call this thing a credo. She was trying to put her basic outlook all in just a few paragraphs, right? So this is like a condensed, the moving principles that she's developed over the years, over a long, productive life. Who will read paragraph? I always pick on you first, Kathy. Can you read her first paragraph?
I can, yes. We are one body, all people. We coordinate as a planetary body, attuning to one another and to the designing intelligence. We are immortal. We are not bound by the limits of the body. We are universal. We are higher beings. Our innate sense of growth potential, our intimation of a higher state of being is true. We are conscious co-creators, partners with God. Mystical and secular awareness unite in evolutionary consciousness as we attune to the pattern in the process and assume some responsibility for the technologies of creation.
Okay, so you get how she's, you know, she writes like a journalist. They're relatively short sentences, you know, with a lot of thought in them and a lot of experience behind that. And we're co-creators, conscious co-creators. She says mystical and secular awareness unite. She's trying to bridge the gap between spirituality and mysticism on one hand, and secular awareness of how the world could be made better on the other. What else do you see in what she's saying? She's basically saying we're more than our bodies, right? We have a spirit. There's higher levels of reality. Those are things that, you know, religious believers and also mystics throughout the ages affirm. She's saying, well, now we know this. It's over and over confirmed. Okay, who else is willing to read? Donna, can I pick on you?
Sure.
Number 2, or the second paragraph.
Yeah, the future affirms the past. The root of religion is religare, to bind back and make whole. We are reunited with our entire evolutionary past, from our cosmic conception through our birth into the universe. We are in contact with other life. The intimations of higher beings is affirmed. We have always been in contact intuitively. The esoteric or hidden is becoming exoteric and clear. Once we saw through a glass darkly, now face to face.
You know, I find this fascinating what she's saying about intimations of higher beings is affirmed. You know, so for example, a native person, First Nations might say, you know, there are celestial beings up there. Like the Great Spirit is at the very top, but then there's all kinds of other spiritual beings. Some of them are given names, transformers, or, they sometimes associate them with the spirit of the bear or the spirit, you know what I'm saying? So in other words, the populated levels of reality, she's saying that stuff is not just purely mythological. There are celestial intelligences that are named in different ways. And so she's sort of like opening up reality. She's saying, this is what you see, so there'd be a Buddhist version of this, Hindu version. I actually totally agree with her. I make charts that try to collect the names that people use for the higher levels of reality. What else you see? Anything else here? The esoteric or hidden is now becoming exoteric and clear. Ooh. Once upon a time, people who believed this stuff had to be doing this alone in small groups in a cave. And she's saying, don't have to do that anymore. It's all out in the open. With your little iPad, you can tune into all kinds of knowledge everywhere.
I was wondering what she means by the future affirms the past. Can you speak to that?
The future she says the more we learn about the future, we see how it came out of the past. Anyway, that's like a summary of a whole lot. Like she always thinks we should, in school, she said all schools should study the Big Bang and everything that happened after the Big Bang in terms of its majors, like the formations of the galaxies. Kids should know this stuff too, she says. And why, certain planetary systems happen in certain places, and then and life forms when certain conditions are met, and then life has its own evolution. And even stars have their lifespan in a way they're living. So advancement, she says, has happened in the past. So why wouldn't it happen in the future? The future affirms the potentiality that was in the past. That's Harold's interpretation of what I think she's pointing to there. Okay. Whose hand was up? Donna. Donna, please. Oh, were you going to say something, Donna?
Well, I was just going to comment on, or at least a thought on, where was it? Hang on a second. I've lost it. We've always been in contact intuitively with the past, or with just in contact.
With higher beings, I think she's talking about.
Yes, with higher. And the story that jumped into my mind, maybe most of you heard it, about the little boy who got a baby brother or sister or whatever, and he kept wanting to go and speak to the little baby by himself. He didn't want his parents around, right? Have you heard the story? And so they find, he kept saying, I go away, I want to talk to Johnny or whatever, right? And so they said, okay, they left the door open. This might not be a true story, but it's a great story. And the little boy went over to the baby and said, tell me about God because I'm beginning to forget. And that tells me about the intuitiveness of us coming. And the sentence where it says, we also create, like we create because we bring the human being to this earth. But this little boy, we're connected to something else higher. But as we live out our lives on this earth, we get further and further away from that knowledge. That little boy just went, tell me about God because I'm beginning to forget. It's just a great story.
That's an amazing story.
Here's an interpretation of that story. The idea that we are born in the mind of God first. We come from heaven, right? Yeah. And that's our origin. Then we fall down and get born on the earth. So this kid sort of is I think he's assuming something like that and saying, I know you just came from up there where it's high. Please tell me about it. You got a fresh memory of it. Mm-hmm. Something along that line. The Orphic Mystery says, we're children of heaven.
I'm adding to the story because the baby went because you can't speak it in words.
Well, and similarly, at the other end of the life cycle,
yes,
you know, it's commonly believed by many different religions that the person who is dying is closest, like the veils between this world and the
Yes.
divine world are lifted. And that person, even though they're still in human form, is far more connected. And
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely.
in
Getting
that
glimpses
return.
of the higher realms, right? Ahead of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. People say, I'm seeing my mother. They're having conversations with someone on the other side. Things like that. That reminds me of my afterlife course. I think, you know, Kathy's husband is going to take my afterlife course later on, right?
Yeah,
Anyway.
Harold's agreed to offer it for us in the fall, probably. So I'm very excited that she did. Thank you so much.
Okay, can someone read the third paragraph? Susan?
Yep.
Oh, you already read, didn't you? No, you
No,
didn't.
nope,
The
I'm
third
happy
one,
to
third
read.
one. Yeah,
Let me
yeah.
just focus in here. Okay. We know more about the creative process. We know more of the laws of the universe as we become more creative and powerful. The laws that guide us are the laws of evolutionary process and transformation. The precedent we draw upon is 15 billion years of success. I love that. Oh my goodness. And infinitesimal co-creators, we greet the infinite universe with the humility of hope that we are loved, we are good, we are needed, and we are capable. That should go on my refrigerator. The separation is over. Through expanded love and knowledge, the desire for deeper union with creative intelligence is satisfied.
We are loved, we are good, we are needed, we are capable. These are like bumper stickers or profound truths in very simple language, right?
Yeah, 15 billion years can't be wrong, right? Love that. 15 billion years.
Patterns that
Anything else you see in this wonderful paragraph? Okay, here's a complicated paragraph coming up. Joan, would you be willing to read this one?
Sure. We become the second couple at the second tree, the tree of life. Adam and Eve were symbolically the first couple. They joined the masculine and feminine together and made a whole being, wherein they reached the tree of knowledge of good and evil and separated from the animal world. To reach the tree of life, to have access to the powers of creation, each person must become whole, uniting the masculine and feminine, the yin and the yang and the yin, the rational and the intuitive. Then we can unite whole being with whole being, co-creator with co-creator. The second couple reaches the second tree, the tree of life, the tree of healing of the nations. Cosmic consciousness is secured.
That's a brief history of everything right there. You see the two trees she's talking about? The tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and then the other one was the tree of life, which is actually in that story. You know, this is the first couple of chapters of Genesis. So she actually reads scripture from time to time and tries to symbolically interpret it in terms of what we know about cosmic evolution and that sort of thing. It also gives you a glimpse of her sense of yin, yang, male, female, active, receptive. So she's incorporating that kind of wisdom, much of which is very Chinese oriented, I believe, the yin yang especially, but also other issues, the balance of male and female, how creativity, co-creation means both genders, all classes, people of different persuasions, different disciplines working together.
He doesn't use the word ego, at least in these writings, very much, but it's very much of this really transcending the ego.
Absolutely.
Like the
Her
individual.
book called The Shift from Ego to Essence is all about the ego she discovered in herself, right? And then she starts talking about, well, I assume that what happened to me happens to everybody in their own way. Their ego gets in the way. And if it gets in the way enough, you will crash, you will burn, you will cause chaos, around you, right? And you may not even survive, right? So anyway, no, that book has a lot about ego, but you're right. Most of her other books are always way beyond that. She's looking at the we, and meaning humanity's capacity, our higher capacity.
The ego also leads us very much to looking at the world in dual way. And the catchphrase, or the phrase that we're becoming more familiar with and comfortable with, is non-dual. The yin and the yang is you need both. There's always something.
Yeah.
There's always an opposite. And the ego goes, no, they and me. And now we're trying to make it non-dual, that it's both that's necessary to complete it. And I think that this brings this to mind.
You know, to me, it's not a matter of dual and non-dual. There's something like complementary. So that's like saying these things you can differentiate them, but they need each other. They're together a whole. So exactly. I think she's looking a lot of things as complementary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even the crises and the breakthroughs are complementary from her point of view. The past and the present and the future are complementary in the sense that they build on each other or lead to each other, or, you know, you learn things from looking at them, at all of them. And then there's the last paragraph here. What time is it? Oh, okay. Bev, please read number 5, the fifth paragraph, the short.
We see that the meaning of our crisis is to activate our new capacities. The purpose of our new powers is universal life. Universal humanity is born, is alive, is well, and is growing. Our birth has been accomplished. We are at a new beginning.
Again, that is such a positive way to look at it. Today is the beginning of the rest of my life. Today is the beginning of the rest of humanity's unfolding into the future. It's kind of how she looks at it. And then at the end, I thought we'd have this issue to think about the whole course, all the women we've looked at a little bit. And to me, there's been this sort of an issue going on, and I call it monistic Gnostic mysticism or theistic traditional mysticism. And I try to describe them. I say monistic Gnostic mysticism, like Barbara Marx Hubbard, claims that humanity can now discern divine knowledge and actually evolve toward divinity without any further dependence on divine revelation. Or it's like we already have divine revelation. We don't need another revealer. Without divine revelation through prophets or the establishing of major religious civilizations. Or here's the other way of looking at it. Theistic traditional mysticism, like the previous women we've studied, most of them, claims that humanity remains dependent on progressive divine revelation through prophets for knowledge of divine reality, as well as for moral spiritual direction and continuing evolutionary advance. So for example, someone like, do you remember Rabi'a? And I'd say even Hildegard and Teresa of Avila would have, and Mirabai, they would have all said, I've absorbed knowledge from a higher realm through Krishna or through Jesus, right? Or through Muhammad. I'm not afraid of that, or I'm dependent on them. They help me know God. They help me get closer to God. And then others might say, you know, like, even say a Buddhist like Srimala, I think she was saying, okay, I got this letter from my parents describing Buddhism. Then she reads it and she immediately feels like she's grasping the Dharma. She knows what Buddha was saying. However, she's dependent on the Buddha. In the story, Srimala says, you know, Buddha came and watched me give a talk. And I asked, how did I do? So she still needed the approval of the Buddha. She wanted to make sure she was doing it right. Is this the Dharma? And in the story, Buddha says, yes, you're doing it right. And you're adding something new. Thank God. Or he didn't say thank God, but you know, you're talking about the Buddha nature. That's what Srimala came up with. That was something a little different. Anyway, so I'm not sure this is an issue, but I bring it up because these women, someone like me who thinks theologically and philosophically, feels like this is sort of a difference. Some of it, sometimes I think it's just semantics. Like they say, getting closer to God. Are you doing that by yourself, or are you doing that with help? And to me, that's the big question. To what extent do we need a revealer? As a Baha'i, I feel like I've benefited from Baha'u'llah's revelation. I have all kinds of insights I would not have without him, right? So I'm in the traditional mold of theistic mysticism, trying to learn more. And I'll say that about all the other ones. Every time I encounter any part of what Jesus or Buddha or Muhammad said, I go, oh, this sounds like it's helping me. How do you build a civilization? Can you do it by just getting smart minds together? Or do you need some higher divinely inspired principles? Those are the questions. You know, I tried to talk to Barbara Marx Hubbard about this, but she died. We were just starting to talk about this, a couple of emails on this question. And she got all excited about this course. Barbara Marx Hubbard got excited about this course. She says, you put me in your course? I said, you're the climax of the course. So, I sent her the whole curriculum and Then she did write a little bit back, and then I heard she passed away. I get, oh no. I can still talk to her, I suppose.
She was so excited that her heart gave out to be a part of this course. She was just so excited. That was it.
Right, my work is done. I can go home now.
I was writing to her a little earlier though.
Someone was taking over. Yeah, she could go rest.
2014, 2015, 2016. That's when I was writing to her. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, any thoughts about all of this? The whole course?
I'm thinking about
what,
something.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, is there something, as I think about all these women, is there something parallel? Like, could you have a similar course and show a similar evolution of thought and comparisons with male mystics, right? Like, would you have that?
Would be missing, I believe. Yeah, you could have
or
a
is
course
there
on male mystic. Absolutely.
Yeah. Or is there something about being a woman that makes the women that we have looked at? Is there something inherently about being a woman that influenced how they think that could not have been expressed otherwise, or something about their female experience?
I want to hear what everyone else says. My answer is yes. The very first day I thought I was saying something like, women have some kind of more intimate understanding of ultimate reality. Intimate, because women have a relational consciousness that's deeper than men. In general, like any one man might be able to do this, but that was my theory, and that's why women are disproportionately represented. If you study mysticism around the world, you keep noticing, how come there's so many women in this? When that's what I thought I was discovering, and I think that's the reason.
I think I have a bit of an answer to that, and also an observation. The bit of an answer, I'll make it very personal, is when my husband and I were dating. And at one point, and the thing that tipped me into, yeah, I could live with this man for the rest of my life, was a conversation we had. I think we were disagreeing about something like that. And he said, look, let's just get this really straight. And he looked me straight in the face, and he wasn't, we were coming out of an argument or something. He looked me straight in the face and he said, you are superior to me. I said, oh,
that guy, he's dead right. The guy is dead right.
Wait a minute. That is a cute way to get out of the situation, right? He said, no, seriously, you are a woman. You have the ability to bring life to this earth. I have to help, but you carry it, you birth it, you gestate it, you do all of that within your being. And that's the answer to the question. Now, I have an observation, because it's great that you said that, Susan, because I thought, how do I bring this into this conversation without seeming like a feminist, which I never attributed my generation, my life to. You know, I mean, I admired the women who were going out there, but I never kind of could just sign on to it that completely. And what I got out of this course, amongst many, many things, is particularly, other than the Christian women, the mystics that I'm familiar with, because that's my background, right? I didn't know any of these people. And then you just finished saying, there are so many of them. So, and I was simply thinking about this evening as we're talking and everything, and thinking, how come, you know, we don't know about these people? Well, you know,
patriarchy.
Yeah.
That's what I said in the first day. There's a reason why all this has been hushed up. The brief title is patriarchy, oppression, right?
Totally.
Which angers the hell out of me. I mean, it's changing now. See, I'm trying to do my little bit.
You're doing a good job. You're doing a big bit. You're doing a big bit.
Well done, Harold.
Yeah.
See, there's a good man behind all these great women.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Oh, I see a heart. Look at this. Now, of course, there's exceptions to all this, but relational intelligence, nurturing, women approach mysticism a little differently and more, on a more first-hand basis than men. It seems to me. Men are more theoretical in it, right? Women have, I think, a more experiential understanding of some of the mystical ideas. In general, right, man? And you can always find exceptions. Yeah. Yeah, some of the women had so-called a lot of male, like they were intellectuals, powerful intellectuals, but then they brought another quality to that, right? Something a little bit different. And yeah, no, mystic men, that makes a good course too, no doubt about it, but it would be missing some of the things that we've touched on a lot.
Would be different.
In this series. Yeah.
It would be
That's what I believe. Relationships have a lot to do with it. Intimacy has a lot to do with it. Nurturing, the nature of life, as you're describing. What does birth really mean? See, for men, it's sort of a metaphor for something. Women, it's an actual, it's closer to that. What does nurturing actually mean? Anyway.
Yeah, like my kids are 4 and 7, and they're just like all consuming. You know, just being a woman. And my husband is in the house with me all the time and is always here, but the kids are obsessed with me. And I think this is just so many women's experience that you just can't kind of be like head down, like doing my own thing, cut off from people. You know, just the nature of being a woman, you're like, I'm constantly so aware of the needs of other people.
The multitasking thing. See, that's another thing women bring to the table. They're integrating a little more. Right, then I think men who are specialized a little bit. Men get socialized to be specialized. Yeah,
in the spirit of what Barbara is pointing to, I would say this, that my observation is that the younger generation of men, fathers, are taking on more and more, are experiencing in a deeper level, actual level, the raising of the children from absolute birth, you know, changing diapers. And I mean, just simple things. And then the more, as the kids grow older, it's not just, you know, determining their professional futures. It's really right down to the nitty gritty. And I think that's part of what she may be pointing to, that just by the circumstances of our times and everything, you know, women go out to work and men go out to work. So they got to work something out, right? All of those kind of things are very positive indications of how we can get there, wherever there is.
You know, you're reminding me of something I had to say right near the end. This class, I taught this course maybe 8 or 9 times in different ways with different amounts of material. And this has been the most rich discussions I've ever had in any of them, even though it's like fewer people, although we've had others, 4 or 5 others that were here too at different times. But this has been, it feels like to me a little more sophistication or more understanding of some of the things we're looking at. And maybe I'm just getting wiser and listening more. Right? Sorry, Donnie. What were you saying?
I said, "But besides you, the man behind us all, we're all women."
I've really loved this course, Harold. Thank you so much for the countless hours you have put into preparing the materials. And yeah, I just am
Thank you, and thank you for your
deeply
contribution.
grateful.
There were other folks in the, Sally was a part of this class, right? Sheila, Linda wanted to be here tonight, but couldn't be. She's always been here. Linda Mackay.
I have a big email list that I send these to. It probably has about 35 people, and I know about 25 people watch the video later. So I know that lots of people are kind of involved just asynchronously. No, I love it. And I always just sing Harold's praises so much. This course is so amazing. I learned so much, and I'm just so grateful for all the million hours you put into all that you know. I just don't know how you know as much as you know. And generously, it's just remarkable.
You know, men's brains have this thing called categories. They're like boxes. And so once I have a box, I put stuff in the box, and then I study what's in the box, right? And then I, and that's, so, but I'm looking at something that's not able to be in a box. It's much bigger than a box, right? All of this stuff is larger realities, but that's why I can teach classes like this. I collect stuff and I have a place to put them, so then I can bring them up and put them in the curriculum, so to speak. Okay. Wow. Thank you so much, everyone. 8:30. Thanks for hanging in. It is really cool that people who came here only once are watching the films too. That's what you're saying. Some of them who only came once, they still are part of the course because they're listening to the videos. And
well, I came in, I didn't know about it until halfway. So I've been going back and catching up as well. Yeah.
You get complete credit for the course.
I asked,
star on the forehead.
I asked Kathy for all the notes. I have the notes as well. Are you going to send the revised version of this chart with which includes?
I gave it to Kathy. Kathy's supposed to send it to you.
Oh, you gave it? Okay. I was in classes all day.
You didn't read all your emails. That's okay. You're busy. But
I'll find it and I'll send it. I'll send it with the recording. I'll get the recording.
new chart has 4 women on here instead of 3. And I integrated Mother. She was new to me. I didn't have her in this original thing. So I spliced her in, and that makes her a very good comparison. That one sheet is worth the price of admission, I think, for this course,
Really good.
All right.
I wanted to say one more thing. What I so value about this particular course is that it makes me value my own development. I don't know if it happened for other people, but little things that I've forgotten about as I grew up, little experiences, I suddenly started to value, whereas I had taken them for granted before. And now I see it as part of a development. And I really thank you for that.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, each person is part of the curriculum, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, Joan. Yeah, Joan.
I just wanted to say I really appreciate. I mean, this is the second time, but my memory is not great remembering, because it was a few years ago anyway. But I really appreciated the discussion, and like you were saying earlier, Harold, just the richness that's come from the other participants, and I haven't had that rich, deep background that most of you seem to have had, and it's just been wonderful to hear just the perspective from each of the other participants. So it's been, and Harold, you're just really good at encouraging that and allowing it and fostering it. So thank you.
An example of a question that came up earlier, we keep talking, sorry about it, but this lady, Jennifer, she's saying, she asked me a couple of times, why did you choose these women?
Mm-hmm.
And that forced me to really answer the question. I was going back and then realized, it helped me grow in my understanding of the course and realizing what is it that's special about these particular women, right? And there are other ones, but these are ones that are, I guess, it shows, some of it shows my bias. I believe in the we development toward humanity as a whole. I just love the global sweep of some of their ideas. It's very powerful and inspiring. Yeah, gives me hope, right? Studying these things.
15 billion years of success, Harold.
15 billion years. Yeah. And the end is not in sight. Good night, everyone. I'll see some of you in another course called The Afterlife.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thanks, Harold.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Love you. Take care.
Thanks, Kathy.